This is a three-part presentation on the place that miracles play in the formation of faith in Christianity and Islam. The first of these deals with the question, do miracles make faith impossible? This is a question Muslim scholars have been facing that follow in the wake of a problem raised in Shabir Akhtar's book, A Faith for All Season, Islam and the Challenge of the Modern World. Dr. Akhtar is an honorary research associate at Oxford University who recognized that Islam is in something of a crisis in its encounter with the modern world, and which to an extent has been made worse by the unwillingness of its faithful to face up to the Western world's tendency of criticizing the various philosophical, scientific, and religious isms that were either of its own making, or which entered into it, or with which it has come into contact. He's a commendable proponent of Islam that anyone interested in studying comparative religions will find worth taking seriously, not only because of his willingness to identify problematical issues within his religion, but that the references he makes to other creedal and philosophical systems in his analysis of Islam's crisis clearly indicates that he is well read in Christian, Jewish, and other sources, and can discuss them sympathetically, as from within, so to speak, while at the same time not subscribing to all of their beliefs. I have only one point to quibble in this book, and that is a definition of a word in a papal encyclical. Get that out correctly, a papal encyclical. So that's a pretty good batting average, you might say. Would that many a Christian understood their religion and could discuss it with the same depth of knowledge as does Dr. Akhtar. As a defender of his religion, he stands as an example for polemicists and apologists of all faiths in his respectful and objective presentation of the positions with which he disagrees. He's a clear contrast to authors and media personalities who exaggerate the benefits of their religion or denigrate and misrepresent those with whom they disagree, concerned more to score debate points or win arguments rather than get at the truth of things. Persons who discourse on subject as propagandists, but not as serious students. Some go so far as to threaten harm and even death to those that disagree with them. This is hardly the case with Dr. Akhtar, who employs a far more rigid criterion of what he will accept as worthy of serious consideration about any religion or philosophical stance, his own or that of others, and how these disagreements should be dealt with. Now, in the fourth chapter of his book, entitled The Silence of Allah, he notes that for some 1400 years since the advent of Islam, there has not been, by his accounting, not only any further revelations, which of course are not expected, as Islam declares Muhammad to be the seal of the prophets, the last in a line of warners sent to mankind to set it on the straight path of salvation, but no further miracles as well as happening in Islamic history. No signs and wonders, nor theophanies, as the theologians call them, to serve as timely motivations that strengthen the faith of believers, as are recorded in the scriptures of Judaism and Christianity. In the Quran, Muhammad himself is never credited with performing any signs and wonders, although other Islamic writings have him doing so on 2 occasions, but these reports were written some 130 years after his death and so are of dubious historical value. For sure, according to Dr. Akhtar, there have not been any such divine manifestations for many centuries now. The absence of these creates the following difficulties. First, true believers are not only deprived of further encouragement that such signs and wonders would bring, but are left to wonder whether the stories told of old actually happened or not. Did God really grant divine manifestations back then? Or were these the products of over-enthusiastic religious imaginations working overtime? Second, unbelievers are dispossessed of the experience that would motivate them to commit themselves to the truth of the revelations. And further, agnostics and atheists can use this drought of miracles as ammunition in defense of their positions, namely that there are no divine signs and wonders because there is no God to make them happen. Now, the Koran makes frequent mention of these past miracles in the Jewish and Christian scriptures as stimulus to believe in the words of the Israelite prophets and the apostles of Jesus. They are pointed to in the Koran as proof positive that the Israelite and Christian messengers were truly appointed by God to fulfill the roles they claimed for themselves. Further, the book warns, to ignore or reject these claims is to set oneself on the road to perdition. Well, getting back to the original question, do miracles, heavenly signs, and wonders erode at best, if not eradicate at worst, the possibility of faith? Some Muslim scholars respond with an emphatic yes to that question. The justification for this position is that they feel that at this point in history, the children of Adam have matured into an age of realization and rational reflection with only the Koran as its ever-enduring miracle requiring the assent of faith. No need then for other theophanies. Such signs and wonders were needed in the past to elicit an act of faith in the revelations when these were new and novel events that had never occurred before in human history. But now that these ancient occurrences have become part and parcel of the consciousness of contemporary believers, they are seen not only as redundant by these Muslim scholars, but as detrimental to the formation of a true and genuine act of faith in the existence of God, their prophet, and his revelations. That is why these theophanies no longer happen according to these scholars, because were they to occur, it would guarantee that Allah truly exists, and that Islam is without question his verified and approved religion. As such, the initial act of faith in Allah and his prophet that the Quran promotes as the starting point on the right path to salvation would no longer be available. Everyone who experiences such events would now know it's true through miraculous confirmation, and so would be prevented from believing that it's true. Now, why is that? Well, we have to take a look at the relationship between knowledge and belief as a sliding scale that actually begins in ignorance and works its way up through these stages. In going from a state of ignorance, where a person has absolutely no certitude about a particular subject, to a state of knowledge where they have a high level of certitude, one must often pass through this intermediate stage of faith. And this is true not only about things religious, but even about natural knowledge as well. A student, in order to become well-versed in a subject which they seek to master, is going to have to accept on faith the testimony of teachers and texts which they read. As more and more of these are acquired, the person starts raising themselves higher and higher to a point where they can say that they truly know something, that they have certitude about the information which they possess, and that it's not simply something which they take on the testimony of others. We can take a simple example of this. For instance, I have never seen myself the Great Wall of China, and if I should mention it to someone, and they cast doubts in my mind as to whether such a thing exists, because how could such an architectural feat possibly ever have been accomplished in its day, I might say, well, I've read about it and I've seen pictures of it and so on. And they can come back and say, well, how reliable are your sources? In other words, they can keep throwing doubts into my mind about the truth that I know about the Great Wall of China. Well, if the situation is important enough, I can always get on an airplane, go to China, and see it for myself. Then I have immediate, direct, personal experience of the truth of the Great Wall of China, and no one can cast doubts as to that experience. There's another way that we can look at this, and that is simply by the relationship of the words to one another. For instance, it certainly makes sense to say that I know, that I believe something to be true. But it doesn't make much sense to say I believe that I know something to be true if I really know it. It isn't just an act of forgetting for a moment. Oh, I knew it back then, but I don't remember it now. No, if I know what my name is, to say that I believe that I know what my name is doesn't add one iota of certitude to my knowledge claim. Knowledge is the more certain condition. Belief is the less certain one. Now, any Christian will understand the importance of this initial faith commitment to the doctrines of a religion, for the same constitutes that all-important preliminary initiation into Christianity. Faith is such an important first element that some Christian communities, albeit a minority of them, have made it the only requirement of salvation. Believe, they preach, and you are saved. Well, this ignores much of the rest of what Jesus has to say about following his commandments. Note the plural here. Not just one commandment, believe, but others that follow on that act of faith. In religion, we are asked to accept certain things as true, along with many future implications attached to that initial act of faith. So then, do miracles, signs, and wonders really eradicate the possibility of that first and most important step in the right path that someone should walk if seeking God's will? It seems as if Muslim apologists, or those of any religion for that matter, that would propose such a reason are at bottom line being dismissive of the concerns of their congregants. Dr. Shabir rejects this position as too extreme, and on this point I totally concur. All one has to do is refer to the reports of such events in the past and recognize that their manifestation did not require acceptance by the mind of their veracity, nor necessitate the will to adhere to them. The Israelites wandering in the desert can serve as an example. They had seen the signs and wonders God worked in Egypt, the 10 plagues, the parting of the sea, manna from heaven, the gushing of water from the rock. Still, some of them murmured and protested, voicing their desire to return to slavery in Egypt rather than endure their lot as free persons serving a long-ranged purpose in God's plan. In the 95th Psalm, God complains how some of these Israelites had challenged and provoked him, although they had seen all his works. So hardened had the attitude of some become, so rebellious their actions, that God ended up dealing with them most severely. Jesus as well had to deal with skeptics and scoffers who not only watched him perform miracles and agreed that these were potent signs and wonders, but dismissed them on various grounds, that by Beelzebub he casts out demons, or he saved others but he cannot save himself. It's easy enough for a mind so set against any supernatural explanation of any event or set of events to reject their more logical implications, and to even go further as to deny that they ever occur or even could occur at all, because they don't fit into the preconceived vision of what that person wants to be true. But is the Islamic tradition completely bereft of unusual occurrences? Events seemingly incapable of natural explanation that could be interpreted as divinely sent signs and wonders, as Dr. Akhtar maintains in his book and a subsequent article published in 2019. Entitled, Can Islamic Natural Theology Explain God's Silence Today? In this article, he reiterates and expands on the position which he had taken in his earlier book. An internet search found some surprising instances that seem to strongly disconfirm Dr. Akhtar's position. I sent him an email about this, and he was kind enough to reply to my discoveries. What these were, and Dr. Akhtar's response will be taken up in Part 2, Incorruptible Body.